right. Where's Mike at? No. Mike, Janice. See Mike?
He was here.
I know he's here.
Maybe he's in the back.
Dave, where's your brothers at?
There's one right here.
Hey, where's your dad at?
Where's Mike?
Where's Mike, Janice?
He went out there.
Is he outside?
Of course.
Because we need him in here.
Yeah, we do. I'll get him.
Wait.
1 second. We're getting him.
Under twin power.
Yeah. Does that ever work?
No.
I don't think so, really. If it did, we
Not
would
when you need it to.
There he goes.
Oh, there he is.
There he goes.
Yeah. All right, we're about to get going. You coming in? Okay. 1 second, we got
Where's your name?
one more coming in.
Well, I'm not that old. I'm only 47.
What's that?
My grandpa.
And here they are. Where do you want to sit?
You and Dad can sit over there, Mom.
Oh, you did? All right. Well, first of all, thank you all for being here and making the trip to celebrate the life of an amazing human that we called Ronnie, husband, dad, pops, grandpa, and occasionally, dumbass. There's a story there that we're going to share in a little bit. It's reflected on a lot of the bulletins, but we'll get to that. We all knew him in a different way and through different times of his life. And I'm definitely looking forward to hearing some of those stories later on today. And candidly, I'm probably thankful we're doing things here and not at a church as we think back on Dad's life so we can tell all those stories. But I digress. It's hard for me to comprehend that Mom and Dad spent more than 51 years of their life together and brought 5 spirited kids into this world. What I don't like to think about is that somehow Dad convinced Linda at Kmart that he was the catch of her life, which kind of means that the 5 of us kids are blue light specials, which I don't know if I like, but
Not all of us.
Tiffany's we are not.
Right.
But what we wanted to do today is just take a few minutes before we visit and put together a celebration to honor a man who was full of life and love. A man who is something different to all of us and was as simple as he was complex. We thank you for being here, and we look forward to sharing some of those stories and memories today and the weeks and years to come. And we put together just a short little day, which is in the bulletin, as we want to remember Dad. And with that, I'm going to invite my cousin up to do a prayer.
Well, he asked me to kind of say a prayer, my Lakota son. So, but what I will do is just in any type of spiritual celebration, we'd like to set the space for the spirits to come in, for our ancestors to come in to hear our hearts, hear our prayers. So with that, we call on 4 directions. We call on God, His Son, and then the Mother, and then our ancestors. So I'll just start with that. So we okpia takia vichasha. Wakia yatua mata sapa sinte sapa. Mitioshpa yayanki amakia yo pilame pila. And wazia takia vichasha. The tongue yatua snail yatua. Mitioshpa yayanki yatua pilame pila. We ohiam via takia vichasha. Open. Michante ki mama yake open the book. Mitiosh by my yake. Yawishta. Now we took a gata. Wamakashka to Ashmani Tishka to Michante ki mama yake. Mitiosh by Wayanke no Yawishta. Pilame. Ana takashila wankataka ate wankataka na chicho shila wankataka na wantigashkatu. Open on takashila. Cheki I am. Gilane bila. Hejitu. Ana unchi ina makaki. Yana kota yunkel. Gilane bila. Ana Roberts did it. Sa ke just in. Is kizi ka. So with each of those, it's calling in the man from the west to come look at us. And then the thunder beams, which are the spark of life. It's also the direction where our ancestors go when we call them in. The Mato Sapla, the black bear for healing. And the Sente Sapla for for life, for the vitality. And then to the north, the man in the north, to the Buffalo Nation, and to the cold winds. The Buffalo Nation for our homes, for our families, for our people, in order to be fed, to be provided for, to bless. And then the Osmi, the cold winds to help with just like now, taking us through the seasons of life. The part where the winter comes and there's death and dying, but to be reborn. So we ask them to come and renew us, and renew the people, and renew our spirits. Especially in the cases when we lose our family, when we lose someone that's close to us. And then to the eastern direction, I've always prayed for understanding and for the Hekaka, for the Elk Nation, for a balance between men and women, between the masculine and the feminine. And then for understanding. And then to the south, for there I've always prayed for forgiveness through that direction, through the Shapani and Wamakashka, and for their help. And then Tokashila Wakataka, to our grandfather, the Great Spirit, and the Father, and then the Son of God, Jesus Christ. And then to hear our prayers, and then we're crying out or sending up our prayers. And then to Uchi, Inamakaki, to the Mother who lays here, and we walk upon her, and she hears our prayers. We're thankful that you hear us and you provide for us. And then the quiet part is for me is the ancestors, the relatives that I remember, that I know have come to help me. And so I kind of go a little quiet on that one because I'm inviting them in. And those are the ones that walk with me. So today I pray, and through all of that, to pray for a blessing. So we're doing this so that all of you will live. We say and do these things so that all the people will live, and live a good life. And just like my uncle, with all my relatives, especially my uncles and aunties, I've always enjoyed my relationship with them. But when my dad passed away, so many of you guys filled in, but Uncle Ronnie specifically really became someone that from the time I spent with him, he stepped right in as dad. And I could call him anytime, come visit him. And it was always a joy to come visit. And we all know how Ronnie was. Oh my God, it was hilarious. 30-some years ago, I show up in the middle of the night here, get in trouble with the local police, and they bring me over to the house. He shines the lights in there. He comes out just cussing up a storm. But what the hell is that? And I was like, it's your nephew. Like, oh, well, God damn it, get your hands in here. Like, all right. But he's, but I can say that for so many of my aunties and uncles. But specifically during that time when we were younger, And it just, I don't know why we clicked so well, but we did. And I always enjoyed him. And it's always been funny, the stories with him. Just some of the similarities too. But anyways, thank you all for coming. And thank you for helping us to celebrate this man, because he was a really, really good man. So,
Thanks, Mike. So I will try and speak a little louder. You get to listen to me drone on while I read Dad's obituary. Excuse me. Ronald Dean Joseph, husband, father, grandpa, brother, son, uncle, and friend, passed away peacefully in his sleep on July 1st, surrounded by many of us by his family, just the way he intended. Like so many of his adventures in life, Dad decided being told what to do is just not for him. Spending his final days in a hospital or assisted care center was not how he wanted to go about it, so he didn't. Instead, Ron spent his final precious days at home, surrounded by his children, grandchildren, and his wife of 51 years. Wow. Dad was always his own person and made his own path in life. Even to the very end, he was still cracking jokes, crushing crackers, and chugging coffee. Ronald Dean Joseph was born in Wagner, South Dakota on July 14th, 1946. He was the third child of Donita Zona and Ferris Francis Joseph Sr., and would eventually be one of 15 children. Ron is preceded in death by his parents, his siblings, Jeannie, Donna, Randy, Mike, Ricky, Gregory, and his over-the-road brother, Walt. He had a life filled with adventures and numerous occupations, ranging from law enforcement to eventually truck driving, which he pursued for over 30 years before retiring to Texas and then devoting his time and energy to his real passion in life, his grandkids. Dad married his wife Linda over 50 years ago, and they had 5 children together who all have significant others: Trav and Michelle, Wendy and Jeff, Brian and Gayla, me and Christina, and Megan and Brad. And then that led to his 9 grandchildren: Austin, Gigi, Nate, Jocelyn, Cohen, Ainsley, Cooper, Miles, and Emma Grace. Ron passed on a lot of knowledge to his kids and grandkids over the years. The old man, he could fix anything. Electrical, mechanical, plumbing, the list goes on. If it was broken, he would figure out why and get it working again in short order. Sadly, his extensive use of specific names for his tools, thingamajig, whatchamacallit, and of course the always useful, the deal, right there. No, not that, what are you doing? Made learning a bit tough, and we are not all as adept at fixing things in our homes today as Dad. Though we did all inherit his ability to break things. Interesting. But in all seriousness, we all miss having Dad available to take a call and starting the conversation with, "Okay, Dad, I took it apart like you said, but now how the hell do I get it back together?" He would laugh, tell us to grab a football, and then start walking us through how to repair whatever it is we had broken. Ron was a stickler for cleanliness and hard work, and all of his children got the pleasure of having a Midwestern work ethic instilled in us. If there was a person who worked harder than Dad, I haven't met him. When Dad was around, there was no such thing as idle hands or break time. Just ask John Boy. Unless it was for him to have his coffee. No, I said him, not you. Get back to work. Dad had more than the typical 9 lives of a cat. I have lost count the number of times Mom would call saying, "Dad's sick, he's in the hospital, we don't think he's going to rebound from this one." So the kids, scattered all across the U.S., would fly or drive a ridiculous long ways, only to pull into the driveway and see Dad, brown overalls on, sitting in his mower and yelling, "Hey, what the hell are you doing here?"
Ron was not one to fill the room with words just to talk. But if you did need some advice, there was nothing you couldn't talk to him about. From parenting, advice to work, life, religion, or whatever the subject may be, he was always willing to pick up the phone and listen and give you his take on things. We're going to miss those calls, Dad. Dad knew life was not about fortunes won and lost or material things left behind, but rather the memories made and the lives positively impacted. His family has lost count of the number of friends and relatives who have reached out recently to share stories about how he influenced and impacted their lives and the lives of their family and friends. Thanks, Dad, for all you did for us and for helping us live our lives in the example you helped set. We love and miss you, and until we see you again, roll on.
So good afternoon again. Again, thank you for being here. As we put things together for today, we know this isn't a traditional memorial as we think about honoring a man that we love so much. But as we're doing this, I found myself thinking about the countless stories I have of Dad and what would be fitting to share. I reflected on a dinner that we had at a local restaurant on his birthday of this year, just 2 short weeks after he had passed away. It was one of his favorite places, and we had all kinds of stories that we shared and talked about. I heard some stories I remembered, some I didn't know, and everything in between. But it wasn't in telling those stories I saw and heard, in telling and hearing those stories, I saw and heard so much love, life, and joy. And I hope that's what we share today as we share a little bit about remembering him. It would be fitting to share a few stories from us kids and grandkids, so that's what we're going to do, is just tell a few stories from us kids and grandkids to reflect who he was in all of those things. All of us that knew him knew he was a mischievous guy with a sense of humor and a practical joker in a lot of ways. He was also a protector. He always had your back and would be the first to stand up for someone when he saw something unjust. For instance, I want you to take a look at the picture in the back of your memorial. Gayla took that picture just a few minutes after Dad had passed away. As we swore, we could still feel him with us. And knowing Dad, he would have absolutely stuck around to make sure we were all doing okay as he went home. But I've thought about that over the past couple months, and that may absolutely be true. But part of me also wonders if he got a little bit of payback from all of his antics. Maybe as he left us, he was like, "Guys, you said you'd be here to guide me. Guys, am I going that way? I am, right? Right?" Until finally, with a nervous laugh, you'd all of a sudden hear Aunt Jeannie yell, "Oh, knock it off, you guys. Ronnie, we're all here. Come on." And when I hear the word Dad or Pops, or as I called him, I think of a million other words from which he is to many of us. Hero, teacher, cheerleader, comforter, ass chewer, Chi-Chi man, that's for you, Austin, wherever you're at, music man, and he was all of those and more. Though certainly more ass chewer to you, Pooh. Despite his gruff exterior, he was a soft-hearted teddy bear who would do anything to help others. As I thought about things, I reflected on my younger years when money was tight, and we were told there wasn't going to be much, if anything, under the Christmas tree that year. But then, every year we'd wake up, and we would be finding presents for each and every one of us. Dad would smile, and he'd watch us all open those gifts, and he'd spend the rest of the day playing with us. And it wasn't until I was older that I learned that layaway is a great option, but someone still has to ensure it all gets paid for. And that's often why Dad would take that extra load, why he'd stay on the road just a little bit longer, why he'd lump that trailer by himself to keep the cash in his pocket so he could provide for all of us. Now I remember all the holidays and the Christmases when Dad wasn't going to make it home because a good old South Dakota winter had moved in and the blizzard was going to make the conditions too tough. But somehow, he would drive through the night, and God knows what kind of conditions, and he would find a way to make it home to us every single time. I think back to all those times. He would roll home, he'd be dead ass tired. 99% of the time when he walked in, he couldn't see straight. because he was so tired, but he'd come home to a wife and 5 kids. Mom would be exhausted, and she'd need a break because we were a lot to handle. More Wendy and Mac than Megan and I, but we'll share about that later too. Anyway.
Story. Tell it.
It's a great thing about it, I am.
He's laughing, though, the truth.
Anyway, he would come home and he'd find the energy somewhere deep and give Mom that break, and he would lean into all the things that needed to be done. He would take a breath, he would focus, and he would begin to clean the house, mow the yard, chew Wendy's ass again. Tell me how great I've done and all the things I've done. Shoot hoops with us. And of course, wash his truck and the cars. And then after all of that, we would light the grill, make some supper, before he finally took some time to sit down in his tidy whities and watch some TV before he fell asleep. And the great thing about Dad was, even with everything else he had going on, he was always in your corner to pick you up and lend an ear, because even in his darkest moments, you could count on his support as it never ended. I remember a lot of late nights and times when he'd see you struggling, and he'd say, "Hey, let's go out to Trek Town and grab some coffee and breakfast." We all knew it wasn't for him, but it was for us to share our struggles, why we were hurting, choices we needed to make, and a million other things. He would listen to it all, oftentimes not saying a word, as you spilled out everything you had inside you. And then when you finished, he would tell you to just keep going, and it would all work itself out. You see, grit wasn't just a 4-letter word around the Joseph house. And trust me, with Pops, there was a lot of 4-letter words. A tradition I am proud to say Megan keeps now as she lives in the same house, but again, we digress. But Dad instilled a work ethic and grit in each and every one of us to keep going even the odds were stacked against us, as he knew there would always be a light at the end of the tunnel. And as he got older, and his gruff outer shell showed some cracks, it utterly melted as he had grandkids. While he may have been a superhero to us and to them, the word Papa was his kryptonite. And it often have him caving at that one little word and offering up sweets for breakfast, a lot of times to the parents' chagrin. Some of the greatest joys, though, are thinking of him and Mom as they got to spend a lot of time with all the grandkids. And it doesn't matter if he was telling AJ to squeeze her cheeks. You'll have to talk to her about that story. Or playing with Barbies, with Juice, Emma, or Austin, and probably Miles, too, wherever he's at. He'd be willing to do anything it took to see us kids smile. And sometimes it was just on how he chose as a grandfather to diffuse the situation. Which brings me back to the story I mentioned about being a dumbass. So if you look at some of the bulletins, that's Dad. They lived behind us, and we had a lot that oftentimes, as you see in the other bulletins, you see him on his tractor, his mower. When Dad traded in the semi, he traded in for a mower. Probably put more hours on the mower than he did in the semi. Well, he had a habit. The ground was pretty soft, so after it rained, he would invariably get stuck. Mom helped him, the kids helped him, I helped him. And we had a stretch of rain for about 6 days in Texas. We'd gotten about 6 inches of rain, and we were having dinner the night before, and I said, "Dad, whatever you do, and for the next 2 weeks, do not go out in the back lot with the mower." Well, the next day I got done with meetings, was dressed somewhat like this. CJ and I were standing out back, and all of a sudden we see that hat along the fence. And I'm like, what the hell is he doing back there? And all of a sudden he comes around the corner, he's like, "Hey, I need your help." "What'd you do?" "I got the mower stuck." "Did you get the golf cart and trying to get it out?" "Got that stuck too." I'm like, so CJ and I grabbed the other cart and we pulled around. And as I got over there, as a father, having a little bit of that anger and with that Dad distilled too, I started to get a little frustrated. And I started getting a little short with CJ. And I remember jumping on him like, "Hey, just do this." And all of a sudden my dad looked at it and he goes, I know, I'm the dumbass." And we started laughing and we said, "Well, at least you recognize it." We had diffused the situation at a time that he often wouldn't have done. So what we want to do is just spend a few minutes telling a few of those stories from his kids and grandkids to share the many facets of his life and his amazing spirit. And no, we will not spend 45 minutes talking to you. We do have short attention spans too. For those of us that know us, we do spell ADHD, JOSEP. Hey, look, a chicken. Wendy, you have some comments? Nope, Wendy's passing. Megan, you're up.
Mine's gonna be pretty short. Okay. I had it printed off, but I left it at home. Why wouldn't I, right? So my dad, I swear the man knew how to do anything and could fix everything. He fixed my bike as a kid, doing my car as a teenager, and years later helped me with the ridiculous amount of plumbing, electrical, and other handyman type jobs around my house because, well, he knew how to fix it because he's probably the one that screwed it up in the first place. Anytime I'd call him, Dad, how do I fix this? He'd try and explain it to me over the phone and usually end up just saying, oh hell, just let me pack up my tools and I'll be up in a few days. Okay, and he would. He'd show up and we would get to work, and there wasn't always times where you were like, is it really gonna happen? But it would always end up getting fixed and it looked great. And his methods were a little bit sketchy, but you know, we always got it done. It always looked great. And there was always, obviously the main theme is a few swear words sprinkled in there. Sorry, Mom. Sorry, Cooper. They heard a lot of them at the house. But I'm glad that he did teach me how to fix things and work on those things as well. Those skills have definitely come in handy these past few years and in the years to come without him here. Him coming up to help didn't just apply to my house projects. If I needed any help with Cooper, he was always ready and willing to head up here and babysit for as long as I needed. 2 weeks when he was only a year old and had his tonsils out, or 3 months when I remodeled my salon. Never hesitated. Cooper and my dad had a really special relationship. Those 3 months that he was up here and I worked at the salon every night, he made sure everything at my house got done. He got Cooper to school, picked him up from school, grocery shopped, even if he didn't always remember what he was supposed to get. You know, it happens. So they shared a pretty special bond those 3 months. I'm definitely gonna miss that. Yep, that's all I can do. I miss my dad, and I hope he's up there enjoying all the coffee he can drink and all the cookies he can eat. We love you, Dad.
I have nothing written down, so I'm not good at this.
Speak up.
But I married into this family when I was very young. And so I got bonus parents. But not long after that, my own father passed. And that was hard. So Ron filled the sole primary role of being my father. And I really took that to heart. I moved across the country by myself at a very young age and moved to Albuquerque, New Mexico, which was lovely and terrifying. At the same time, my car got stolen and was not drivable. They found it. So I'm in the new city, can't drive a car. It was destroyed. And he happened to be driving through town. And he said, I'll be there. I'll come help you. He fixed it so I could drive it again. Took me to Walmart to buy the club so I could lock my steering wheel. I drove it for 3 months without a driver's side window, but he bought me plastic and duct tape to duct tape it on, because it rains every day during the summer in Albuquerque. So I was that person driving with no window and then putting it up and having the club. But he did all of this. We scrubbed tobacco that they had spit all over the car. They tore out seats, and we got it to work. I had to have this car, and he helped me. I was 21 and terrified, and that cemented our friendship. I was broke, but I told him I'm going to take you to this barbecue place because he loved barbecue. It was called Rudy's. I know you know Rudy's. And we bonded over this meal and over him helping me in such a time of crisis. And we just never looked back. He helped me with homes, fixing things. He knows I'm terrified of electricity. But he taught me how to do things. I taught him how to do things. He started to like how to cook and I'm pretty good at that, I think. And he danced with me in my kitchen, which I love to do. And he, in every way, was my dad. And the last 5 years have been hard, if not more than that. But it's been a process and a transformation, and watching those that you love slowly lose their ability to be who they really are, and they still are in their mind, is a difficult thing. And he did it the best he could, right? With a lot of grit and determination. It was not easy for anyone, but he did it. And when his time came to go, I was very happy for him. And I was grateful for him, because he deserved to be in a much better place. And it was his time, and he chose that. And as much as I'm sad to not have him, I'm very happy he's where he is, with others that love him and that are already there. And that's all I got. Thank you.
See how far I go. No promises on this one. So initially I'd planned to stand up here and relay memories of Dad. The good, the funny, and the bittersweet. And oftentimes that too. But you know, I don't think I'm gonna do that, one, because I'll melt down. Plus, I mean, I could fill books of memories of my dad. And I think a lot of us here actually could do that as well. So instead, I'll try and keep it simple and just say thank you. Thank you to all of you for being here, but also, thank you to you, Dad. Thank you for teaching me about the important things in life. Thank you for bestowing in me the irreplaceability of family. The families we are born into, the families we marry into, the families we create, and those invaluable friends that also become family. Family and friends really are the foundation our lives build upon and revolve around. And it's awesome to look around this room today and see all of them gathered here for you, Dad. Thank you, Dad, for showing me that people, no matter who they are or what they do, are all just people, no matter from what walks of life they may come. Titles, prestige, never impressed you, and certainly never intimidated you. A person is just a person, and we all have so much more in common than we realize. Dad lived it and talked about it all the time. Thank you, Dad, for living life the best way you knew how, and for letting all of us in this room today come along for the journey. You showed me what's important in life and how important it is to take time for those little things. So many memories of you coloring on the floor with us when we were kids, on the floor with your grandkids, or jamming out to some Johnny Cash, Chuck Berry, and Johnny Horton in your semi-truck. And the simple pleasure you showed us to be found in doing a job and doing it well. Especially if it let you fix something that was broken. And as we've all reflected on, not to mention the colorful vocabulary we all learned while helping Dad fix things. So thank you, Dad, for your unselfishness. You would drop everything to help someone in need. Fixing cars alongside the road was just part of a trip to Sioux Falls. Helping neighbors, repairing every machine known to man, or babysitting when just a young family needed some help. That was Dad. That's not to say the old man was always a saint. There were some things in this world he also taught us, though, that they are worth fighting for. Again, friends, family, and at the end of the day, doing what's right, even when it wasn't popular, were things you would not ever compromise defending. Dad, this is tough. I still cannot believe you're not there to pick up the phone the next time I call. Hard to accept that. To be honest, I don't think I really have yet. But even though I know logically you are gone, I feel like you're still here, watching over all of us. Until we all see you again, I do have one more favor to ask in a long list of favors that I've asked. I know I've spent decades asking you for things, Dad, but just please keep doing what you have always done. Keep watching over our family and friends in the days ahead. Thanks.
Tough one to follow, am I right? All right. Well, as most of you know, I'm Austin, also known as Foof by pretty much everyone in the Joseph Bunch. I'm the firstborn grandkid, and when Grandpa thought he was getting a grandson, well, let's just say it wasn't exactly what he thought he was getting, okay? Instead of buying Tonka trucks, race cars, stuff like that, my grandpa, every time we went to Walmart, you bet your ass I was leaving with a Barbie. Not
You were
kidding.
3 or 4.
You know, 3, 4, my collection was very big. I also had an aunt, so I had a lot of Barbies for hand-me-down. But my thing I can never forget with my grandpa is every time we went up to pay for that Barbie, it was for my sister. Now, remind you, my sister's now 18. It was 11 years after I was born that I got a sister. So, whatever sister he was talking about then, I haven't met her yet. Grandpa was an accepting man. It doesn't matter who you are. I've never in my life felt sorry. More accepted by anyone than Ron Joseph. So that's all I'm going to say on that. Now I'm going to try to get through the hardest poem I think I've ever read in my entire life. And it's called A Trucker's Last Ride. I got it. He traveled the roads in years gone past, a life he chose and hoped it would last. Driving all night from state to state, trying to get home, and arriving late. He parked his truck now. His engine has stopped, and those who he loved him, their hearts have dropped. He traveled the country with a smile of great pride, and now he drives the streets of heaven on a trucker's last ride.
And so we come to a close of this part in sharing stories to remember Dad. And as you listen to these stories, for me, the thing to remember is that no matter what was going on, it wouldn't take him long to find a cup of coffee, hand you one too, and start telling jokes or stories, all while laughing and smiling, because that's just who he was. But it's also why I felt it was important to share with everyone that in the last weeks of his life, he looked his mortality dead in the eye and then went into it with his head held high and love in his heart. Let me share a few things to help bring that home, as it also shows who he was better than any other way I could describe it. Dad wasn't one to show a lot of emotion, though again, those grandkids sure did help him soften that outer shell. And learning to give great hugs and constant reminders of I love you are things that he grew into later in life. And it was in that usual stoic demeanor I was used to hearing when he would call me and want to chat. But the last time he called, he was in the hospital, and he called me one night when I was traveling. And I answered. And I could tell that from his voice, this one was going to be a little bit different. We chatted for a few minutes before he broke down, and he cried. And he told me that this time wasn't like the others. And as he fought all those emotions, I'll never forget, we both cried, and he asked if I'd make sure and take care of Mom as she would need it in the weeks to come. And all of his struggles with mortality and uncertainty, he's still worried about others first. Then, just a few short weeks later, he asked me one morning to push him around the assisted living home and have a cup of coffee so we could chat about quantity versus quality of life. I knew that morning he was going to stop taking dialysis. But he knew what he was choosing to do, and again, he wanted to do it on his terms. He made that decision with his head held high and love in his heart. I picked him up the very next morning, bright and early, the Monday morning before he passed. And we drove home knowing it would probably be the last drive he had. And for a man who put on more than 3 million miles over the road, that is certainly saying something. He knew he was headed home to die. And I remember we were talking in the car when there was so much to say and so much left unsaid. I looked over at him. I said, "Dad, you're one of the lucky ones. You get the privilege of being surrounded by your loved ones, and I would encourage you that if you have anything left to say, I hope you find the time and the way to say it." He looked out the window. I could tell he was pondering, and he was soaking in the words and thinking. Then he looked directly at me and he said, "You know what, Brian? I don't have anything left to say. You all know I love you, and now I'm just glad I get to be surrounded by you, either in person or through the phone this next week or two, as that's what matters to me. I'm ready." It was a pretty profound comment, and one that gives me comfort, for I know he was at peace with his life and his relationship with all of us. Our last week together will be one of the most impactful times of my life. As he knew, again, he was down to days to live. But he kept his humor, cracking jokes, apologizing for spilling his coffee, right, Matt and Megan? Like 386 times in 45 minutes. But let me also tell you, damn, he knew if that coffee wasn't fresh. So don't try microwaving that, because if you did, he was going to tell you to go back and get it. Got busted the last week doing that one too, just like Dad would do. And not one time did he weep or ask why. And not once did he make his last week even about him. He knew when he came home, he had, at best, 10 to 14 days left with us. And he never wanted to have all of us around, he wanted to just have all of us around him, not worrying about him. Instead, he was still cracking those jokes, getting us to laugh, even in those final hours before he passed away. And as friends would stop by to share a moment with him that they all knew could be their last to see him, he would muster some strength from the inner well that never ran dry. His eyes would sharpen for a minute, and he would smile as he looked at them, and he'd say, "Hey, Myron," or "Hey, Kim, I love you too," because that's who Dad was. And I will forever remember one of the very last moments I had the privilege of sharing with him as I was helping him to the bathroom. Even though his strength was failing him and he was weak, he still insisted on trying to stand on his own, as he didn't want to be a burden to any of us. As we got into the bathroom, I leaned down next to him and I said, "You ready, Pops?" He laid his head on my shoulder, kind of nuzzled me, and he said, "I love you, Brian." We shared a 5 or 10 second moment as tears streamed down my face, and just like that he said, "Okay, let's go." And I helped him stand up. Little did I know, a few short hours, he would make his journey into the spirit world. You see, even in Dad's final hours, with his body failing him, he was still our superhero. He was still worried about all of us, protecting us, letting us all know he loved each and every one of us unconditionally, like only a parent can do. And even when he passed, I believe he was still thinking of us. I had been to see Dad almost every day for those 3 weeks. And almost every day when I got there in the morning or got there and he was sleeping, I would find him in the fetal position, curled up and covered up. But the night that he passed away, he was wearing a Johnny Cash t-shirt, just like this, that Megan and I had bought for him in Nashville. And we went and found him. He had one hand behind his head, and he was at peace. I believe it was his last act of love for us to let us all know he was good with where he was headed. So we come full circle. We're here to remember him in all the ways we each knew him. We can recall the good, the bad, and yes, even the ugly. For Dad had all of his moments. Each and every one of us does, for we're all human. But if he were here to celebrate you and your memories, he wouldn't complain about all the things you weren't. He would celebrate all that you were. He would be sitting here with a cup of coffee, telling your best stories, and getting others to smile and laugh, because that's what Dad ultimately always focused on. The good and being a light in the darkness. Finding ways to protect us physically, emotionally, and mentally. It was his ability to do so much of that, which I believe embodied and personified the very essence of his amazing spirit. Mom, Dad passed the baton on to us kids, but he'll be forever watching over you. So I hope you'll take the time today and the weeks and years to come and tell his stories, as we all have a piece of his essence with us. I love you, Dad, and I hope I can continue to carry you forward and being the very best version of myself as well. Until we meet again, keep smiling, laughing, and checking to make sure there's enough wood on the fire. No, not because he's there, people. I see some smiles thinking you may have known somebody. But because he always kept a fire burning, because he loved coffee made over an open flame. And his coffee pot still sits out in front of the house, waiting for him to come and get it. So thank you for being here to celebrate Dad's life. And while he may not have said it often, he loved each and every one of you in your own way. And when our time comes, he will be there to guide the way and probably cracking jokes too. Well, except for you, Austin, Jocelyn, Cohen, Ainsley, Miles, and Emma. He'll probably be there to give you a hug first and then a swift kick in the ass because that's what Dad was. So thank you again for being here today. Now please enjoy a short video that we put together for Dad, and then stick around with us to share some of those amazing stories.
And Cooper.
And Cooper, I left Cooper on that. Sorry, Coop. He'll be there for you for sure.
We're just texting you.